The woman in the coffee line didn't know she was about to humiliate someone who had spent the last 14 hours keeping a stranger's child alive. Nadine Schaefer had been awake since 5 the previous morning. Not the kind of awake where you hit snooze twice and drag yourself to the kitchen. The kind where you are standing under fluorescent lights at 3 in the afternoon watching a monitor spike and then go flat and then spike again, and your entire body becomes one long held breath. The pediatric ICU at Mercy General didn't care that it was a Tuesday, or that Nadine had eaten half a granola bar at noon, or that her sneakers had a small bloodstain on the left toe from when a central line went wrong during the shift change. The unit didn't care about any of that, so neither did she. She had clocked out at 7:15, taken the elevator down to the lobby, and walked 2 blocks to the Birchwood Café, because the hospital coffee had started tasting like something dissolved in warm regret, and she needed something real before she drove home. Her hair was still half pulled into the clip she'd put in at 6 a.m. Her scrubs, the plain navy blue ones she wore under her badge, had a crease along the left sleeve from where she'd pressed her arm against the side rail of a crib for 20 minutes without moving, because the baby inside it had finally fallen asleep and she wasn't going to risk waking her. The Birchwood was the kind of place that felt almost aggressively cheerful at 7 in the morning. Wooden tables, chalk menus, little potted succulents. The kind of cafe where people sat with laptops and brought their dogs and ordered things with oat milk without looking up from their phones. Nadine didn't mind it. She liked the noise. After a 12-hour shift in the PICU, ordinary human noise, the clatter of a coffee cup, someone laughing too loud near the window, a toddler banging a spoon against a high chair, felt almost miraculous. Evidence that the world outside the unit kept going. She got in line behind a man in a fleece vest reading something on his phone. There were 4 people ahead of her. The morning rush was thinning out but not gone, and the 2 baristas behind the counter were moving fast, heads down, efficient. Nadine unclipped her badge out of habit. She always did when she left the hospital, a small ritual that meant the shift was over, she was a person again, and dropped it into the front pocket of her bag. She was thinking about her bed, not in a dramatic way. Just the specific weight of that thought, the way it sits in your chest when you're tired enough, bed. Her apartment was 11 minutes away. She had a casserole dish she'd left soaking in the sink, and a plant that probably needed water, and a phone full of texts she hadn't answered. All of that could wait. Bed first. She didn't notice the woman right away. She was standing 2 places ahead in line, mid-50s maybe, in a cream-colored blazer with a silk blouse underneath and sunglasses pushed up onto her hair even though they were indoors. Her name, Nadine would find out later, was Constance Avery. She was the kind of woman who moved through a room like she had already decided the room was slightly beneath her. She was talking on her phone in the half-loud voice of someone who wants to be heard but maintains plausible deniability about it. Something about a board meeting. Something about a renovation. The occasional short laugh that landed like a period at the end of a sentence no one else was invited to read. The line moved. The man in the fleece vest stepped up to order. Nadine shifted her bag on her shoulder and stared at the chalkboard menu without really reading it. She was going to get the dark roast. She always got the dark roast. This was not a decision that required her full attention. That was when Constance Avery turned around. She looked at Nadine the way some people look at something that's appeared in the wrong place. Not hostility exactly, not yet, just a kind of reflexive assessment. The navy scrubs, the messy hair, the bags under Nadine's eyes that no amount of concealer was going to touch after a shift like that. Constance's gaze moved over her the way a scanner moves over something and finds it not quite what was expected. She ended her call. "Excuse me," she said, not unkindly, but with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime making requests sound like facts. "Are you in line?" Nadine blinked. "Yes, for here, or are you picking up an order?" "For here." Constance looked at her again, the scrubs, the bag, the lanyard with the badge tucked inside, and something shifted in her expression. Not softened, the opposite. "I'm sorry," she said, and she wasn't, "but this line is for paying customers. There's a counter in the back for—" She made a small gesture, the kind that contains a whole sentence without completing it. "For staff." For a moment, Nadine wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. The cafe noise continued around them. The espresso machine hissed. Someone's toddler knocked a spoon off a table with a clatter that nobody looked up from. "I'm not staff here," Nadine said. "I'm a customer." Constance's expression arranged itself into something that was almost a smile. The kind of smile that says, "I am being very patient with you. You're wearing scrubs. I'm a nurse. I just got off a shift at Mercy General." Nadine kept her voice level. She was too tired for anything else. "I'm in line to buy a coffee." "Of course." Constance turned back toward the counter. Then, quietly enough to be casual but loudly enough that the man in the fleece vest and the woman behind Nadine both heard it, she said, "They really should have a separate entrance." The man in the fleece vest said nothing. The woman behind Nadine made a small sound, not quite a word, and looked away. Nadine felt the heat rise in her face. Not anger exactly, or not just anger. It was that specific exhaustion of being made to feel like you need to justify your presence in a room that has nothing to do with your work. Like the 14 hours she'd spent keeping someone else's daughter alive were something she was supposed to apologize for or hide. Like the scrubs were a mark of something lesser, something service class, something that belonged in a back corridor. She didn't say anything else. She didn't move out of line. She just stood there, jaw set, looking at the chalkboard menu she'd already memorized, and waited. The man in the fleece vest finished ordering. Constance stepped up to the counter and placed an elaborate order in the tone of someone reciting a legal brief. Oat flat white, 1 pump of vanilla, extra hot, name spelled out letter by letter. The barista, a young woman with a nose ring and the eyes of someone who had been on her feet since 5 a.m., wrote it down without expression. Constance paid and moved to the end of the counter to wait, and then it was Nadine's turn. "Dark roast," she said. "Medium. To go." She paid and stood at the other end of the counter, a few feet from Constance Avery, who was back on her phone. Nadine stared at the brass edge of the counter and breathed. She was thinking about the baby, 7 months old, viral myocarditis, had been admitted 3 days ago and had turned a corner sometime around 5 that morning, heart rate stabilizing, color coming back, mother crying into her husband's shoulder in the family room. That was what Nadine had been doing in those scrubs. That was what those scrubs meant. She did not say this to Constance Avery. She was not going to perform her credentials for someone who had already made up her mind about her. She was going to get her coffee and go home. The door opened. Most people don't notice when a door opens in a coffee shop. You're aware of it peripherally. A change in the ambient air, a brief shift in the noise, but you don't turn around for it. Nadine didn't turn around. She was looking at the counter, watching for her cup. But other people turned around. She noticed it in pieces. The man in the fleece vest glancing up, then holding his glance. The barista with the nose ring looking past Nadine's shoulder for just a half second before she caught herself and looked back down. Someone near the window went quiet mid-sentence. Nadine turned around. He was in his late 30s, maybe 40, with the particular quality of stillness that some people carry in their bodies like a second spine. Not rigid, not tense, just present in a way that occupies more space than size alone would account for. He was in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain gray Henley, boots. He would have looked completely ordinary, except for the dog walking beside him on a short leash, a Belgian Malinois with a working harness and the alert, composed expression of an animal that has been trained to notice everything. The man's name was Joel Schaefer. He was Nadine's husband. She had married him 4 years ago in a courthouse in Virginia, with her sister and his unit's master sergeant as witnesses, because they had both agreed they were not the kind of people who needed a big production, and they'd wanted to get back to work. He had done 3 deployments, most recently with a joint task force she was not supposed to know operational details about and didn't ask for. He had been home for 8 months. He worked now as a K-9 trainer and handler consultant for a federal contractor that supplied working dogs to law enforcement and government agencies. The dog beside him, a 4-year-old Malinois named Brix, had been his partner for 2 of those deployments. Joel had texted her at 6:30 that morning. "You get off at 7? I'll come get you so you don't have to drive tired." She'd texted back a thumbs up because she had been mid-handoff and didn't have time for words. She had forgotten to tell him where she was going after. He had tracked her location. They shared it as a matter of habit, not surveillance, seen she'd stopped 2 blocks from the hospital and walked over. He came through the door and found her immediately. He always found her immediately. It was not something he thought about. It was the same instinct that had, under different circumstances in different places, served an entirely different purpose, but the mechanism was the same. He read the room in about 4 seconds, not in a dramatic way. He didn't slow down or square his shoulders or telegraph anything. He looked at Nadine, looked at her face, and understood. Then he looked at the woman in the cream blazer, who was still on her phone and hadn't noticed him yet, and understood that too. He walked over to Nadine and put one hand on her arm, the lightest possible pressure, and didn't say anything immediately. Brix sat down beside him without being told. The barista with the nose ring put a cup on the counter. "Dark roast, medium, to go?" "That's me," Nadine said, and picked it up. Constance Avery ended her phone call. She was waiting on her oat flat white, and the silence had shifted in a way that had finally reached her peripheral attention. She looked over. She looked at the man in the gray Henley, then at the dog in the working harness. Her expression went through a series of small recalibrations. "Is that," she started, to no one in particular. "Working dog," Joel said, not aggressively, just factually, the way you'd clarify something that had come up. "I know, Constance faltered. Are you two together?" "We're married," Joel said. Constance looked at Nadine, at the scrubs, back at Joel, at the dog. I was just saying to her," Constance said, with the particular brightness of someone attempting to retroactively reframe something, "that they should have a separate entrance. For the hospital workers, easier for everyone." Joel looked at her. He didn't say anything for a moment. This was, Nadine knew, not a silence born of not knowing what to say. Joel always knew what to say. He chose silences the way other people chose words, deliberately, and with a clear sense of what they'd accomplish. "She's a PICU nurse," he said finally. "She's been on her feet since 5 yesterday morning. She just got off a 14-hour shift." Constance opened her mouth. "She was taking care of a 7-month-old with heart failure," Joel said. "The baby went home last week. Her parents sent flowers to the unit." He paused. "She's in line to buy a coffee." The cafe had gone quiet in the way that cafes go quiet when something is happening that everyone can feel, but no one wants to acknowledge directly. The barista with the nose ring was very focused on the espresso machine. The man in the fleece vest was examining his phone screen with great attention. The toddler near the window had stopped making noise. Constance's flat white appeared on the counter. She picked it up. "I didn't mean any offense," she said, with the clipped precision of someone who absolutely did not want to continue this conversation. "I know," Joel said, and he said it without edge, without irony, without anything that could be called a weapon. He said it the way you say something that is true and also at the same time not enough. Constance left. The door swung shut behind her. The cafe exhaled. The toddler said something unintelligible and knocked a napkin off the table, and someone laughed, and the espresso machine hissed, and the ordinary noise of the world reconvened. Nadine looked at Joel. He was looking at the door. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. I was handling it. I know that too." She took a sip of her coffee. It was very good, the way coffee is always very good when you've been awake for 14 hours and you've been waiting for it. Joel crouched down and ruffled the fur behind Brix's ears, and Brix accepted this with the dignified patience of an animal who had long since decided that humans needed these kinds of things, and he was willing to accommodate them. "Did you eat?" Joel asked. "Half a granola bar." He straightened up. He had a paper bag in his other hand that she hadn't noticed until now, from the bakery on 5th that did the egg sandwiches she liked. He held it out. She took it. She looked at him. He was looking at her with the expression he always had after she came off a long shift. Not pity, nothing like pity, just that specific quality of attention that she had taken her a while to understand was its own kind of language. It meant, "I see what it costs. I am not going to pretend it doesn't cost that. I am here." "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." They walked out of the Birchwood Cafe together, Brix moving alongside them with the steady, unhurried gait of an animal completely at ease, and if anyone in the cafe watched them go, they kept it to themselves. What had happened in that cafe did not stay in that cafe. Not because Nadine told anyone. She didn't, not that day, not for a while. She went home, ate the egg sandwich standing over the kitchen sink because she was too tired to find a plate, and then slept for 9 hours with the blackout curtains drawn and her phone on silent. When she woke up, it was late afternoon, and the apartment was gold with sideways light. And Joel was in the other room watching something with the volume low, Bricks asleep across his feet. She lay in bed for a while and looked at the ceiling. She thought about Constance Avery. She thought about the particular arithmetic of that moment, the scrubs, the assessment, the quiet declaration about a separate entrance, the way the cafe had kept going around it like a river around a stone, indifferent, unremarkable. She thought about how many times, over 8 years of nursing, she had performed exactly that same calculation. Decide whether it is worth it, decide whether you have the energy, decide whether the moment calls for explanation or silence, and almost always land on silence because you are already so tired. And because nobody who has already decided about you is going to undecide based on what you say next. She thought about Joel, who had walked through the door and said 3 sentences, and not one of them had been theatrical or escalating or designed to humiliate anyone. He had just stated what was true. He had said, "Here is who she is. Here is what she was doing. She is in line to buy a coffee." That was all. She thought about Bricks sitting down beside him without being told, with that particular Malinois composure, alert, calm, utterly unbothered by the opinion of anyone in the room. There was something almost instructive about it, if you were in the mood to take instruction from a dog. She got up, drank a glass of water, and went into the other room. Joel looked up. Bricks's tail moved once, acknowledging her without lifting his head. "Hey," Joel said. "Hey." She sat down on the other end of the couch. On the TV, something was happening in what appeared to be a cooking competition. She watched it for a moment without processing it. "Did you know she was doing that before you came in?" "I knew something was off," he said. "I could see it through the window." "You could see it through the window. You were standing a certain way." She knew what he meant. She had a particular posture she fell into when she was containing something. Shoulders slightly forward, weight even, jaw just barely set. A coworker had told her once that she looked like she was bracing for impact. Joel had told her more than once that it was the thing he had noticed first about her, the night they met at a friend's dinner party 3 years before they got married. That she moved through a room like someone who expected to have to hold something heavy and had already adjusted her center of gravity in advance. "She thought I was a cafeteria worker," Nadine said. "I know." She wasn't even mean about it, that's the thing. She was just certain. Like she had looked at me and run some kind of program and gotten her output, and that was that. Joel didn't say anything, because he understood that she wasn't asking him to respond. "I've had people be genuinely awful to me," she said. "Patients' family members who are panicking and take it out on whoever's standing in front of them. I understand that, I can hold that, it doesn't go home with me. But that was different. That was just, she looked at me and decided. And I wasn't doing anything to her. I was standing in a line." "Yeah," Joel said. "I'm really tired," she said. "I know, not just from the shift." He nodded. He reached over and put his hand over hers, not squeezing, just there. She looked down at his hand and then out the window where the afternoon was going gold and then orange and the street below was doing its ordinary evening things. Someone walking a dog, a delivery truck double parked, a kid on a bike. "The baby's parents called the unit this morning," she said, "before I left. I didn't take it, I was in handoff, but they left a message. Said they wanted to thank whoever had been on overnight." Joel looked at her. "She's doing really well," Nadine said. "Ava, that's her name. Ava." She said it like it meant something, which it did. They said she laughed for the first time in 10 days. He didn't say anything, and she was glad. There was nothing to say to that. There was just the fact of it. Ava, 7 months, laughing again, sitting in the room with them, warm and solid and entirely sufficient. After a while, Bricks got up from where he was lying, walked across the room with his slow, thoughtful gait, and lay back down directly across Nadine's feet. She looked down at him. He did not look back up. He was done with the journey. He had arrived where he intended to be. "He does that," Joel said. "I know." She had lived with both of them for 8 months. She knew Bricks's vocabulary of gestures by now, the way he held his ears when he was working versus at ease, the particular angle of his attention when he had clocked something. Joel hadn't yet, the rare, deliberate quality of his physical affections. He did not bestow them randomly. When Bricks chose to lie across your feet, it was a considered position. She left her feet where they were. The cooking competition continued on the TV. Outside, the light finished going orange and went purple and then gray. Joel made dinner, pasta, Nothing elaborate, the kind of meal that exists to take care of someone without requiring them to acknowledge being taken care of. She ate it at the kitchen table with both hands around her bowl, and they talked about nothing important, the way people talk when the important things have already been said or don't need to be. Later, washing dishes, she thought about Constance Avery again. Not with anger. The anger had been there, in the café, a clean and righteous thing, and then it had run its course the way anger does when you're too tired to feed it. What she felt now was something more complicated and less satisfying, a kind of resignation, and underneath that, something she recognized as sorrow. Not for herself exactly. Or not only for herself. She thought about the other nurses at Mercy General. The aides, the transport staff, the people who cleaned the rooms and restocked the supply closets and ran the labs and did the work that kept the hospital breathing. She thought about how many of them had stood in a line somewhere, a coffee shop, a pharmacy, a parent-teacher conference, a grocery store, and been looked at the way Constance Avery had looked at her. Been assessed and found to be a certain kind of person. Service class. Background. Someone who should perhaps use a different entrance. She thought about how none of them had a husband who happened to walk through the door at the right moment, and how most of them had gone home and said nothing because there was nothing to say, because silence was the path of least exhaustion, because explaining yourself to someone who has already decided about you is a cost that compounds over time. She dried her hands on the dish towel and hung it back on the oven handle. Joel was in the other room. Brix was somewhere. She could hear the TV still going, low. She thought, I am not going to stop wearing my scrubs when I leave the hospital. I am not going to start changing clothes in the parking garage so that strangers in coffee shops don't make assumptions. I am not going to manage my appearance to manage other people's comfort. The scrubs were not a costume. They were not a statement. They were what she wore to work, and work was what she did, and what she did was keep people alive. That was the whole story. It was not complicated. It did not require a separate entrance. She went back into the living room and sat down, and Brix immediately relocated himself across her feet again, and she decided not to think about Constance Avery anymore, or at least not tonight. She thought about Ava instead. 7 months old, laughing for the first time in 10 days. That was the thing that was true. That was the thing that stayed. She told the story eventually. Not right away. It took about 2 weeks, and it came out sideways, the way things do when you've been carrying them long enough that they need somewhere to go. She was at the nurse's station on a Tuesday night during a slow hour, eating cold noodles from a container, and her colleague Priya was across from her filling out charting, and somehow the conversation got there. Priya had a specific reaction to the story. She didn't gasp, didn't perform outrage, didn't do any of the things people do when they're performing solidarity rather than feeling it. She just looked up from her charting with an expression that said, "Yes, I know that exact thing." "The blazer," Priya said. "The cream blazer," Nadine confirmed. "It's always a cream blazer. Or a cashmere something. Some garment that is specifically engineered to communicate that its owner does not do anything with their hands." Nadine almost choked on her noodles. "That is exactly what it was, the separate entrance," Priya said, with the flat tone of someone accessing an old memory. "I had a woman tell me, this was at a pharmacy, I was in my scrubs, I was picking up my own prescription. She told me I should go around back. She thought I was delivering something. What did you do?" I told her I was picking up a prescription for a blood pressure medication and that the irony of this interaction was not lost on me. Priya said it without inflection. She didn't understand what irony meant, I don't think, because she just said "oh" and moved her cart. They sat with that for a moment. "Joel came in," Nadine said. "I know. You told me that part. He stated the facts. He didn't make a speech. He didn't threaten anyone. He just said, she's a PICU nurse. She's been on since 5 yesterday. She was taking care of a baby with heart failure." Nadine looked at her container of noodles. "That was it. That was enough. More than enough." She paused. "I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks. Not about her. About that. About how much it costs to have to justify your presence somewhere, and how most people don't have someone who walks through the door." Priya was quiet. "I'm not saying he fixed it," Nadine said. "The thing that makes it possible, the looking at you and running that program and getting their output. That doesn't go away because one guy said 3 sentences in a coffee shop. No," Priya agreed. But I keep thinking about Constance Avery's face when she looked at him. The way it just, Nadine made a small gesture, rerouted. She had her version of what was happening, and then he walked through the door with bricks, and she had to revise it, and you could see the revision happening in real time, and it was just, I don't know, inconvenient for her. Very inconvenient. Nadine finally ate another noodle. He was just coming to drive me home because he knew I was tired. Priya smiled then, a real one, not performed. He tracked your location and got the egg sandwich. He tracked my location and got the egg sandwich. Nadine confirmed. And that's it. That's the whole thing. He showed up because I was tired, and she had to revise her program, and Brix sat down and didn't care about any of it, and I drank my coffee and went home, and Ava laughed. Nadine looked up. You told me that part too, Priya said. Right. Nadine closed her container. And Ava laughed. She had not told the story intending for it to go anywhere. It was just a Tuesday night in a quiet unit, 2 nurses eating at the station, the kind of conversation that exists between people who spend their working lives in the compressed intensity of a hospital floor and need the pressure to release somewhere. But Priya had told someone, and that person had told someone else. And 3 weeks later, Nadine walked into the break room to find 4 people looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately read. The coffee shop thing, said a man named Santos who worked in the cardiac unit and had the energy of someone who had been briefed on something and was barely containing his reaction. Who told you? Does it matter? Priya told you. She told Delaney. Delaney told Marcus. Marcus told me. Apparently Brick sat down like some kind of, he just sat down. He always does that. He's a trained working dog. He defaults to sit when there's no active task. He sat down, Santos said, with the conviction of someone who has already decided on the version of the story he prefers, like a statement. Nadine looked at all of them. 4 people who had spent their professional lives in the specific arithmetic of the hospital. The triage, the assessment, the sustained attention to people in their most vulnerable states. Looking at her with something that was approximately admiration, but felt more personal than that. More like recognition. She said there should be a separate entrance, said one of the others. A travel nurse named Greer, who had been at Mercy General for about 6 weeks and had already developed strong opinions about most things. She said that, and then your husband walked in, and then my husband walked in. Nadine sat down and said I was a nurse, and that was it. Greer nodded slowly. He just said what was true. He just said what was true. There was something in the way Greer repeated it, the way the simple fact of it landed, undramatic and exact, that said more than anything that could have been made into a speech. There was no moment of reckoning in the story, no transformation, no one learning a lesson and publicly declaring it. There was just a woman who got tired, and a man who showed up, and a dog who sat down, and a cup of coffee, and the ordinary mercilessness of being assessed and found to be less than what you are. And underneath all of it, a baby named Ava, 7 months old, who had been very sick and was not sick anymore. That was the thing you carried out of the hospital with you at the end of a 14-hour shift. Not the humiliations. Those were real, and they mattered, but they did not survive the arithmetic. What survived was the particular weight of that monitor stabilizing at 3 in the morning, the sound a mother makes when she understands that her daughter is going to be okay, the way a laughing baby at 7 months sounds like an argument against everything that wants to make the world smaller and meaner, and more certain about who belongs where. Nadine Schaefer wore her scrubs home every night. She got her coffee at the Birchwood 2 or 3 times a week after long shifts. She did not use a different entrance, and sometimes, when the line was long and she was tired, and some part of her braced for the familiar weight of being assessed and recalibrated and found to be approximate, she thought about Brix, sitting down on the Birchwood's clean floor without drama or announcement, completely settled in his own purpose. There was something there, she thought, some instruction she was still working out how to use. But she was getting there.